Well, good afternoon, everyone. Recently, on behalf of the police department, we released a statement regarding the implementation of our new body-worn camera program. And the reason I felt that was so important and that we needed to do that was to give information, provide information to the public regarding a significant investment that they've made in the police department that has now been placed on hold. As you all know, in the last several years, and really even before that, transparency has been a big issue with police departments around the country. We want to be no different than that. We want to be as transparent as possible with everything we do. And when a public entity, when the city of Oklahoma City and its residents invest a significant amount of money, millions of dollars into something, and are not getting the results of all of the things that are capable in that technology, we feel it's important to let everyone know where we're at and what's going on with that. And so that's why the statement was released today, and I'll answer any questions that maybe you have.
Can you just give us a basic situation, or really like where all this started, where it is now?
Sure. Our body-worn cameras that we were using when they were originally implemented, great technology. They were on the cutting edge of camera technology at the time, but it's like anything. It's like your cell phones. After a few years, newer and better products come out, and also the older technology doesn't work as well. We were at a point with our body-worn camera technology with two things. Number one, we didn't have enough cameras for all of our officers that were in patrol-related assignments dealing with the public on a daily basis. But then also, too, those cameras were beginning to fail, specifically battery life. So, for example, in a 10-hour shift, it was not uncommon for an officer's camera to run down maybe 3, 4, 6, 7 hours into that shift and not last the whole shift. And we had some instances where that affected a call that they were on, something that had happened where that camera shut down in the middle of that. So it was time to replace that technology. And when we did so and started moving forward, we knew there might be some things with the new technology that wasn't present in the older cameras that we would need to sit down and negotiate with the FOP. And we did that. Thought we had an agreement in place, and then some other factors entered into that, and that got shut down. And so we're kind of stuck where we are now. We have the new cameras in place. They are out there, but we don't have all the features activated. And right now, the cameras that we're installing in our vehicles, we can't turn those on at all until we reach some type of agreement. And so I just feel it's important for the public to know that their investment in technology, that we want to get it out there, we want to use it. But we're not able to do that right now through the bargaining process.
It seems like there's one of the key factors of the new one is the switch that goes on, I guess, when the gun is drawn, period. How is the new stuff different from the old stuff as far as activation and that kind of stuff?
There are some automated features. For example, like you said, when an officer draws their firearm, which to me and most of the officers I've talked to, that's a safety feature. They don't want to have to mess with their camera if they're in the middle of a situation where they have to draw their firearm. They don't want to be trying to push a button on a camera. Also, too, what you see is when officers are engaged in a pursuit or other high risk and stressful interaction, even a traffic stop, that's just another thing that they have to do in the car. There's a lot of things going on in that vehicle when they're doing that. So it has automated features synced with the cameras that are in the car. So when that, for example, when the overheads come on a patrol vehicle, the camera features are automated. It's also automated if multiple officers are on a call and one officer activates their cameras, activates his or her camera. They don't have to, the other officers on the scene don't have to worry about that. It activates all of them there too. So, and these are just technology upgrades. It's no different, you know, really the procedures we have now would apply to that. It's no different than, again, I compare it to like a cell phone. When you get a new cell phone with new features, you know, you want to use those features and have those. And it's all about safety. It's all about, you know, transparency and making things easier on those officers out in the field who already have enough to do as it is.
Your statement mentioned that the disagreements coming from trying to add a recommendation from 21CP. Can you talk specifically about what recommendation y'all were trying to add to the procedure and why that's caused an issue with the FOP?
Sure. One of the things that we tried to implement as part of the bargaining process this year was the 21CP recommendation to not view body camera prior to an interview after a critical incident such as an officer-involved shooting. That was introduced into the bargaining this year. It was pulled away so that we could try and reach an agreement on some of these other things, but that entered into the equation when we entered that into the table on bargaining. Then the other items that we were trying to get through the body-worn camera program were also pulled into that. So we tried to remove that so that we could reach an agreement and use the technology on our cameras that are out there now and get moving forward with this and work on some of those other things later.
So does the FOP have an issue with the new technology specifically, or is their main issue with the not viewing the video?
I think you'd have to ask them, but I could tell you in our meetings that we originally had when we came to a tentative agreement, there really wasn't issues with the new technology in and of itself. And so basically, I think there were some things that they just wanted to clarify, which I appreciate, to make sure that some of those new technologies, things weren't used so that it could be abused, and that it could only be used in instances that there was a strong justification for using them. So I think they had some legitimate concerns there, but again, I felt like we worked that out. But then this other part with the interviewing, when that got entered in, that kind of pulled some of that back. But again, we've pulled that out for now to try and work that out later so that we can move forward with this technology. And this in-car technology too is something that we haven't had in our patrol cars in the past. So that is something that's new and different, and that's part of the reason we wanted to sit down and negotiate this and get this going. Because I mean, again, the majority of officers that you talk to out there, they want this technology. They want to use it. It's very beneficial to them. It protects them. It protects the community. It helps us be transparent. We're getting ready to release information on our most recent officer-involved shooting, and so our officers have become accustomed to this, and they want that and want that protection.
With the FOP filing a grievance, what is the next steps in this process?
So we disagreed with the terms in the grievance, and it's at the point now where it will probably go to an arbitration, and then an arbitrator will rule on it. And the reason too I felt it's so important is when this happened before, that shut down our body-worn camera program altogether. So the public definitely needs to know that we hope that won't happen. We hope it doesn't get to that. But that's always a potential that's out there, and therefore that's why I felt like the public needed to know.
When was that last dispute?
I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was like 2016, 17, somewhere around in there.
So when you say shut down the whole program, that would mean officers wouldn't be able to use the body cameras they already have?
There's the potential that an arbitrator could say that until we reach an agreement that they could shut down, what we have. Again, I'm hopeful that that won't happen, but if that potential's out there, people need to know that.
How long does arbitration usually take?
It just depends. COVID has really delayed that process because normally you pick an arbitrator and then that person has to schedule a time in their schedule to come and handle the process. With COVID, those times have been a little bit longer. Sometimes arbitrators won't travel, and we have to sometimes schedule it a different way, maybe virtual. So it's just really random in how long it takes. It could take 6 months. It could take a year. It could take 3 months. It just depends on the arbitrator.
The investment for the new body-worn camera technology, when was that actually approved, and when did you guys get the new technology?
I believe it was approved by council back in October, and we started, as soon as it was approved, we started implementing the cameras. Because again, the cameras we had were failing, were not working, were not lasting a shift, so we rolled them out as quick as we could. And at this point, we haven't turned on, as with any type of technology advancements, there's a way that you can control that, and we haven't turned on a lot of the features. We've been installing the camera equipment in our vehicles as those vehicles come out, and some of them are retrofitted too. But the officers themselves have the ability to turn that on or not, and we've told them they don't have to turn those on right now because we don't have an agreement or a procedure in place.
But some of them have turned on the new features?
Not the new features, just the equipment that's in the vehicles. We ran a pilot program prior to implementation, and so as part of that pilot program and testing, we had to test with the vendor to make sure it would work with our other equipment in the car. We were able to at least see what they do, but the ones that we're installing now, the point I'm trying to make is I can't keep them from turning it on, which we want them to turn it on anyway, but they've been told that that's not covered as part of the new agreement.
In the past, there was complaints about the recording time and the storage. Has that been addressed with the new system?
All resolved with the new system. All the storage is cloud-based and handled by the vendor. We don't have to do anything, as far as updating servers or anything like that. It's all handled by the vendor, and it's much better quality video. And again, that's part of our annual fees that we pay to have the vendor handle all that storage.
You said you guys were planning on coming to an agreement. When was the last time you guys talked to each other? Is it just through these press conferences? And are you planning on attending the one that they have at 1:30 as well?
No, I won't be attending that. We've been meeting regularly through contract negotiations, and we've reached out again very recently to try and resolve this latest issue too.
Anyone else? I guess just when was the grievance filed by the FOP? Do you know when?
I don't remember the exact date. It's been within the last few weeks.
And have you all met since they filed the grievance?
I haven't, but there has been some meetings as far as contract negotiations. There's been some meeting and discussion, but I haven't been in those.
Are there any concerns about any security issues with the new system moving forward and this new vendor?
No, it's the vendor's been around for a long time. We're not the first city to use this vendor. It's Axon is who we use, and they've been in the business a long time. A lot of major cities larger than us are using them and have had very good success.
Good afternoon. I'm Mark Nelson, Vice President of the Oklahoma City FOP. Thank you for being here. We wanted to make some comments regarding the press release that the department and Chief Gourley put out earlier today about the body-worn camera system. We weren't privy to the press conference that he held, so we'll be responding to the comments in the press release. But first and most importantly, it's important for the public to understand the Oklahoma City FOP supports body-worn cameras. Not in any way, shape, or form have we tried to propose or advocated for removal of body-worn cameras from our officers. We stand for transparency and believe these cameras protect both the public and our officers. Negotiating policy changes through the collective bargaining process is complicated and nuanced. Historically, this is done professionally and privately for several reasons. For example, many of you may not be aware that several years ago we won the first arbitration over body-worn camera policies and still chose to work something out with the department that would put cameras back on our officers sooner rather than later. If we were looking to be difficult, this would not have been the course of action. We can agree several of the recently proposed changes, in theory, would ultimately be beneficial to our officers. The department and the city chose to put this issue on the bargaining table, knowing full well it is subject to our regular process. The chief even said so in his press release. However, it is the details of those proposed changes that are vitally important to make sure we get right. And to the officers and members who must wear these cameras on a daily basis, you know the micromanaging and nitpicking that occurs. We are looking to shore up some of those loopholes so that you can more and most effectively do your job. City leadership should be concerned by the resources wasted on attempts to implement policy that is not properly negotiated. The chief is intimately familiar with this process and how it protects officers, as he used it to his own advantage 3 short years ago. When the process doesn't go your way, you don't go airing your frustrations to the public. We all have to be involved in this process. There are rules that have to be followed. This is a failure of leadership. We are focused on making sure that there are enough bodies to put cameras on and not just enough cameras to put on bodies. We'll be glad to sit down and continue working on a resolution to our differences of opinion. Ironically, in a few short months, contract negotiation starts up again. We are committed, as our track record shows, to resolving these issues, doing it professionally. It has to be done through the correct process. Appreciate you being here, and I will be glad to take any questions.
When did the FOP file the grievance?
So it would have been a few short weeks ago when we found out that they were actually going to implement the equipment and some of the features that go along with that equipment. We, in order to maintain our ability to grieve it, we have a 20-day window that if we don't, we lose any standing to grieve it. So I don't have a date for you exactly. Within the last 4 to 6 weeks.
Just kind of in a layman's terms, what are some of the specific things that you guys have issue with in that proposal?
So it's a great question. I wouldn't say that we have specific issues with any of the proposed changes. It's the details of those. Some of the new changes, technology-wise, are when the camera comes on, who can view it, when it goes off. There's several features that cause cameras to automatically come on. One of them is live streaming. Officers' privacy is extremely important, and I would say as an example of our willingness to work through some of these issues, the night preceding the Julius Jones incident or his possible execution, the chief called and asked us if, regarding any possible rioting that might take place or protesting, if they could, or that they wanted to do the live streaming. And we had a gentleman's agreement. We didn't write anything up. We said, that's great. We want to make sure everyone's protected, no problem. But even in that instance, that evening, that feature was violated. Some officer who was out doing his job's camera, he was on in his interaction with an individual, and I won't say who and get into the details of whom, but somebody on the department started live streaming, and this happened on more than one occasion. So to be transparent, we don't think that was on purpose, but those details are vitally important to have worked out in policies that address those types of things. If I didn't say it earlier, who can watch these videos and when is extremely important to our members.
Let me ask you a question about that.
Sure.
If I'm not mistaken, sorry for getting here late.
No, it's okay.
You may have already gotten to this. If I'm not mistaken, there is a disagreement among people. I think Mr. Prater has articulated this, that he believes that the camera should, the footage should not be reviewed prior to a statement being made by the officer in a critical incident. The argument, his argument being, and I say this because we interviewed him,
Sure.
If you read the article on the Oklahoma County Sheriff's Office policy, his argument being that officers don't necessarily remember every little detail when they go through their memory, right? You got the adrenaline going, all that, and they will go watch the video footage and they will see something that they didn't remember, and then they go change their story, or in his mind, they're more likely to go, well, I got to make my story match up with what
Right.
the thing shows as opposed to what I actually experienced, et cetera, et cetera. Can you speak, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that one of the questions in terms of when an officer reviews footage related to a critical incident?
So I have not talked to the district attorney on his position on this, but have heard, and I think to be agreeable with you, the way you described his position is probably accurate. We haven't heard anything differently. That was one of the things when we were negotiating this. So this is important to know. We have a tentative agreement. Tentative agreement meaning we're going to send a contract for next year out to our membership to vote on here in a couple of weeks, fiscal year 21-22. We have been in that negotiation process since March of 21. The city put the body-worn camera policy, the city and the department put the body-worn camera policy on the table as part of the process. And that was one of many changes in the policy that they proposed, was what you alluded to, the limiting of viewing camera prior to giving an interview or statement on critical incidents or officer-involved shootings. We, in the context of the entire contract, did not reach an agreement on that policy. And we told them, if you pull this off the table, we will visit it next contract year. And they were, I mean, I can only assume they were okay with it because they did. They pulled it off the table. They pulled the entire policy off the table. And so what we're left with is the current policy, some of which addresses the change in technology. Most we feel doesn't. So that's not really, I mean, I can't speak because we haven't talked to the department about this. This press release today just literally floored us. I have no idea where it came from. I got an email last week asking to sit down and discuss this, and we've never refused to sit down and discuss anything. We haven't done it yet, but and negotiation starts in a few short months. So if there's some changes that the department or the city wants to make to the policy, they have, an obvious window here in just a few short months to do so.
So that you guys can bring body-worn camera policy into those full negotiations?
Either side can.
Okay, you're open to it?
Absolutely.
Lastly, real quick, I'm sorry, I'll turn it over to somebody else. Can you, the specific when to review the footage on a critical incident, can you speak to what your preference is on that? My understanding was that your preference was to keep it the way it is, which says you get to view it before you make your statement.
Sure, it's a fair question. I think there's probably a better time to address that. But we have science and a lot of different police organizations, to include departments and labor unions that represent them, that have different differences of opinion on what is best. I can say this. We have never heard from the district attorney that he has given any example of what he is concerned about actually happening. So we can hypothesize all day long about, well, an officer might change his story. We have zero examples of him being concerned with that at all in any interview. So minus that, we're probably not inclined to make a change along those lines.
So I'm confused, the city, and you just said that the city took the proposed changes to the body-worn camera procedure off the table, and it's, safe for negotiations for next year. So why have you not rescinded the grievance, or am I misunderstanding what the grievance is about?
No, it's a great question. So we filed a grievance, right, to preserve our timeline. They're implementing these changes, right? They're putting these new cameras out on the street. And again, without going into detail, which was a fair question, when these cameras come on, when they go off, blah, blah, blah. And that still has to be negotiated. So they can't have it both ways. I just thought that this was not as important to them as they alluded in contract. And we're going to put cameras on. We have no problem with the cameras being on the officers. Have never advocated for removal of cameras, not one time. There is a reference in the chief's press release about communication from the FOP to our membership about that. Really what the context of that is, when we won this arbitration last time, the arbitrator said, take the cameras off. It wasn't the FOP, it was the arbitrator. And so that's the allusion, or the alluding to what might happen. There's no threat that the FOP was going to advocate for this. That's just disingenuous to even remotely suggest that. So we'll see what happens, but if we can't just withdraw the grievance and allow every other change that we feel has to be negotiated happen.
So the grievance is because, they're using these new cameras without the department and the FOP having come to an agreement.
Essentially, yes. It's not the use of them. It's really more the technology that these cameras bring to the table. It's not the cameras themselves. So I know it is complicated to understand, and I'll be willing to, as long as you have or need information, I'll try to explain that. But it's a good question.
The new cameras are the ones that allowed the live streaming that and when you said that got live streamed, do you mean Facebook, YouTube?
No, it's a fair differentiation. Anybody on the department can literally look at what that officer's.
Oh.
I say anybody, whoever has the accessibility to live stream.
Can watch at that point.
Yes. So currently, it's very restricted of who can, after the fact, look at videos, right? A lot of that's in the policy. Matter of fact, we would say all of it's in the policy. So the ability for someone to live watch it, we're not opposed to the idea of that. It's the details. It's the details. We've said this for years.
if I remember right, in the last negotiations, the concern was there was concern that, let's say an officer and their supervisor have some beef.
Sure.
And can that supervisor just go and spend their Friday nights rolling through
Yes.
40 hours of footage because they want to find something that the person they don't like?
So let me give you an example of the nitpicking that currently happens. A pursuit, by the book, nobody gets hurt, suspects taken into custody safely, no crashes. And in a review, which is allowed by policy, right, a pursuit review, what comes down from the top? Well, you didn't shuffle steer the way you were supposed to steer during this pursuit. So an officer protects the public, brings a dangerous criminal into custody, and what they hear from up top, you didn't steer the way you were supposed to. Trace, I can give you dozens of examples, some of which include language, right? I'm dealing with a subject who may or may not be deciding to comply with commands. And so I'm going to be professional. I'm giving you an example of, sir, put your hands behind your back. Put your hands back. Let me see your hands. And they're argumentative. They're not compliant. So I may escalate a little bit and tell them with a bit of profanity to put their hands behind their back. It happens. They're handcuffed. Nobody's hurt. Well, you violated the policy on public courtesy. I mean, it's that kind of stuff, which I'm giving you an example. It's a fair question. I'm not saying this is why we're here. These are just examples that we have to ensure our members have the conditions to work in and do the job that they're tasked with doing of public safety without these types of things being just looked at will. And without going into any further detail, we're concerned that these cameras currently, certain footage of it is being viewed outside of the policy that we already have. So we're exploring that as well. We're just looking to shore all of this up. And I'll reiterate, we're not opposed to sitting down and doing that. Matter of fact, I think we probably can.
As far as the cameras themselves, Chief Gourley just said that they had put the cameras into place, but they hadn't turned on the new technology yet. Are you taking issue with that?
Well, here's what the FOP has to operate off of. We filed a grievance. The response from the chief was, we are implementing this new technology to be very specific. Automatic activation, live streaming. I mean, I think he's actually probably provided his response to you on December 1st. So as far as we knew, this was all happening on December 1st. We weren't told any differently, not until we received a city manager's response maybe a week to 10 days ago, where he sustained a part of the grievance that did not allow for live streaming. So I don't know what they've done. They haven't communicated with us. And you want to talk about communication, and he says in there he's open to communication through this process. Well, that would be helpful to have on our end as well.
So you don't necessarily know if it's being used, the new technology is or not?
I get differing answers from different officers. And the technology is something that is important, is these cameras are turned off and on in a different manner than the old cameras. Well, when for years and years and years, and officers are taught, I mean, we train from a place of what's called muscle memory a lot of times. So when we're in that high stress situation, we fall back to our muscle memory. Well, if I have to do something differently to press it twice versus once in a high stress situation, I mean, I've seen multiple videos of officers in high stress situations where they already had their camera on the right way, but they weren't sure, so they get back in the car and do it, and they accidentally turned it off. And then they get in trouble for violating the policy of failure to activate. So there's so many details in this policy that we have shown that we're willing to, we don't have a problem with it. We just got to have it tightened up. And this is feedback from our members. I don't wear a camera to work. Nobody on that third floor has ever worn a camera to work. So this is about making sure that the men and women, in addition to public safety, obviously, but the men and women who have to wear these on a daily basis can do so without fear of being just nitpicked over tiny little things. And that's part of it.
Should we be able to watch the live stream of the chief? Would that be, no, so you put a camera on him. Real quick, I wanted to ask, maybe I spend too much time at the state capitol. Sometimes when there's issues, sometimes the issue that gets out in front maybe isn't there's other issues as well. So
Right.
Can you talk about the other issues for this contract negotiation? There's a question about pay, if I'm not mistaken, right?
There's not anymore.
There's not anymore.
No,
Okay.
the city's, well, I think it might be probably improper for me to comment on it until it's done. I have no problem at the right time giving you any, being transparent with you about that process. We always want to make sure that the benefits that our officers have draw the most qualified candidates here. By the way, we're more focused on the 150 officers that we're short right now in this department than when someone's camera comes on.
Well, that's what I was getting at, is I didn't know whether,
There's a lot of issues in negotiations. Matter of fact, Trace, this is probably the most the most detailed negotiations. I've been on the team for about 10 years, and the city brought more this year than they ever have. We likewise did. So to narrow it down to a couple of issues, it just wouldn't be fair without the context of everything. And so, but yes, I mean, yeah, we always negotiate pay every single year. And so, but we ultimately agreed to, at least tentatively, the city's initial offer. So,
I appreciate that.
sure.
Anybody else? I got one other question. Last time I was here,
Yes, sir.
you had a debate, and you moderated a great debate, or panel discussion.
Forum.
Have you guys had a vote on endorsing a district attorney candidate?
That's a great question, but we're going to kind of stick to the body camera topic today, and I appreciate you asking.
Well, I mean, it's not every day you call me up here.
So you filed the grievance, can you talk about what you foresee as the next steps here?
Well, when I get the opportunity to respond to the request to sit down, and in fairness, I mean, I could have done it last week, was just crazy, and I didn't think that we were on a day-to-day timeline, right? And hadn't been reached out to since. But I'd say probably once the holidays get over with and the new year starts, we'll be glad to sit down. We were actually discussing this prior to negotiations this year. And the city's the one that put it on the table. It wasn't us. The city did. So then they pulled it off just as well. So I would say in the next couple of weeks, we'll be willing to sit down and start talking about it. But we think it's best served for the entire process that this is negotiated in contract and not outside of that. And apparently that's what the city thought last year too, because they put it on the table. So.
You were mentioning earlier about how they're trained in the pressing the button and how sometimes they accidentally turn it off if you're having that. What if the automatic activation make things actually easier then, so then you wouldn't have to worry about that at all? Sorry if you already addressed that. And in an ideal world and situation, everyone has their side, right? What would be the ideal compromise? Would it be like, oh, you're okay with the automatic part, but you're still able to watch the footage part, like, because you guys, someone has to eventually, right?
Yeah, so obviously, we want to be very transparent and don't want to negotiate this publicly. Doesn't need to be, it never has been, and it's worked just fine. But, so to answer your question specifically, yes, it's not just the turning of it on, it doesn't go off automatically. So when it needs to be turned off, it needs to be turned off not just for the officer's sake, but possibly for an individual's sake. And people need to be able to know that they have some privacy at work, right? I mean, this hasn't been an issue for 5 or 6 years. So generally, we're not opposed to when these cameras come on. It's the safeguards and the details that surround that need to be worked out, because that's all part of the policy.
Lastly, on cameras, real quick, I believe the chief wanted to make a change, you may have already done it, in when records requests are fulfilled for footage. And I think previously there had been, a longer period of time, so that investigations, you guys do internal investigations of shootings and things of that nature, that those would continue. I believe the last I saw is that the chief was either had changed that internally or wanted to change that. Is that finalized yet? Do you guys have a opinion on that?
So I don't know if it's finalized. I don't believe that's part of the policy. So right, there's state law FOIA requests that address that. We've never been asked about it. The department probably, I assume, is abiding by state law, and we don't have any say or opinion. Doesn't really matter. The law is the law. So we haven't been asked about that.
Thank you.
Anyone else at all?
Are we able to view the grievance that the FOP filed?
I believe it's a matter of public record. I will check. Obviously, you can ask the city. They would have a copy of it. I believe it's a matter of public record. I don't have a problem. Let me check. If there aren't any issues that would be compromised the integrity of the whole process, probably wouldn't have an issue with it, but there's probably some things to consider before I do that. Well, thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. Short notice. And I'll be around if anyone has any other questions. Thank you.